Good morning. Yes, I think it's still morning, 11:30, except for those of us in South Africa. Good morning, Debbie. This is Joe Little.
Hi, Joe.
Okay, so this is the presentation. I hope everybody can see it. Please tell Carrie or Mary if you're not seeing something, or if the audio, whatever, is not working well. But I believe that we're recording, and I believe that everybody's been shared. I guess I should double check for all the people. Let me just check for that for a moment. Nope, not that way, this way. Participants, we've got 2 more to admit, sorry. Okay, good morning. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, so there are 2 sessions, one today, one tomorrow. Today we're talking about the context and the basics, the basic ideas, the basic principles around planning and release planning, and what does it mean to be agile in that context. Tomorrow we get into what are we actually going to do this day, this Agile Release Planning day that I'm recommending, what's actually going to happen with the team and the business stakeholders. So today the context and the basics, tomorrow the day itself. Okay, so the program, we're going to do a little bit of an intro, talk about why planning, give a little bit more context, particularly why I recommend 6 months. Talk about how much we know on day 0 or at the very beginning. Talk about how planning helps us learn. Then the context within project portfolio management. Then we'll review some key ideas. After all that, we'll kind of look back and say, okay, what's really changed then? I'll recommend some actions, and then we'll hopefully get into your questions. So we hope to have a few minutes at least for those questions. So I'll try to pace it in such a way that we have that time, at least for a few minutes. Okay, so at least many people think, and I think I agree, that planning is required. How much to believe in a plan is another question, but planning is required. So it's a must. And we have the phrase, a failure to plan is a plan to fail. We have also Dwight Eisenhower's quote, I think we've got it there correctly. In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. What's at least one good reason? Because it helps us learn, maybe about each other, maybe allowing us to learn from each other what each person knows. But anyway, it enables us to learn. Hopefully, we use the learning and we adapt more successfully later on, as we move through time. So you might say, as we start to do the project or build the product. Okay, what's wrong with planning? So people complain about it. No one knows the future is one sort of obvious statement to make, at least not fully. One can guess, but one doesn't know it, and things do happen, as we say. The customers really don't know what they want. That's extraordinarily common, I think, near universal. Change of some sort will happen that's, as we might say, unexpected. We have the classic phrase that stuff happens. Is it really important to do the planning? I'm sorry, that's not really the issue that I'm getting at here. We often find that management wants to change the direction of things. Sometimes the customers do, but certainly management will from time to time, and we wonder why we spent so much time planning for something that wasn't really that important, so it turned out at least. The estimates of the future are always crappy, and then if we do the planning, then the mean, ugly, evil managers will use it to punish us. So there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about planning. I think that's fair. I do think those who take those cons and want to forget about planning altogether are going much too far. But they do, I think, have some legitimate concerns. Okay, I want to make the context small, particularly for today and particularly for learning. Excuse me, Philip, just a second. Where is my, just a second, sorry guys. I've got to admit, Philip, there we go. Okay, so I want to make the context small. One team, 6 months worth of work, at least we think it's 6 months going into it. I think we did, yes. Okay, so 6 months worth of work, a vision that can be accomplished in about 6 months. Sorry, additional people are joining us. We want to accomplish multiple releases in that time period, but why so small? Because it's more digestible, because at least I think you all, not necessarily you personally, but you all can learn it much more effectively if it's a small, relatively simple situation. If we make agile planning complex, with all the complexity, for example, of a SAFe project with 10 different teams or something, I think it becomes quite confusing, and we can't see whether we're doing it in an agile way or in a more waterfall way. It's so complex. Whereas if we make it small and simple, then we can learn the basics and become more comfortable with them. So you see here that I've got a little bit of an outline where at the top, where we're building the product in 6 months, but we're expecting the product to learn, to evolve or to grow or to at least last for 4 years for sure. That's the initial expectation, and then the idea is at least for another 2 years if it's successful. And then we start to compare the sort of end of life retrospective plan to the day zero plan, and compare those things. So how much do we know on day zero? Certainly we don't know everything. We certainly don't know everything about the future. Some people seem to want to assert that we know nothing on day zero. My guess is more that we're in the 30 to 70% range of useful knowledge. That is to say, knowledge that it will still be useful after all the changes happen. And sometimes it'll be closer to 30 because there's more change, and sometimes closer to 70 because there's less change. But maybe 50% is fairly typical. So if that's the case, that we're missing a lot of the puzzle pieces out of this 1,000-piece puzzle, in my metaphor at least, if we're missing half the puzzle pieces or something like that, how long should we spend doing the initial plan? So therefore, I recommend 1 day. And then once we have the initial plan, once we can see our stupidity, you might say, we can then prioritize it. Once we do that, then we can continuously learn, and change will happen, and then replan continuously. That's at least our idea about agile planning. Okay, so we will also want to put it in the context of organizational planning, at least a little bit. So at least I find, as you may have seen in this prior picture, that that there's a whole bunch of ideas or project proposals or products or things to do that the committee of 7, including both business people and technology people, the committee of 7 has to prioritize that, and of course they always do, and make sure there's only one number 1, and there's only one number 2, and one number 3, and so forth. And they can see at the beginning of the year, or maybe in October for 2019, that we can only do about N projects, give or take, maybe a little bit, a range around N. But we, with the people that we have, with the resources that we have, but really we'll call them people mostly, with the people that we have, we can only do up to about N projects. So they've done that. They've been logical. They use some sort of a logical formula or syllogism algorithm criteria to prioritize these things. And then they give one and only one project to each team. And then we do the Agile Release Planning. Well, obviously, they would only give one project to a given team, right? I mean, you would never want to slow the team down if they were working on the most important project with anything else. So, of course, that always happens. And then the team will, of course, do it better. But we'll get into that in a minute. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so there are usually a bunch of problems there. And we started to tease about them. The feedback loop back from the team to the committee, the steering committee, whatever we call it, is not as good as we'd like it to be, for example. So part of that, of drawing that picture, means that you or somebody involved has to see these different problems and start to work on them. See that the way it's working currently is not the way that it should be working, and then therefore make it better. But the key thing is we're still focusing on trying to do the planning for that one project, for that one team. So some key ideas. The work must be important. The steering committee estimates very quickly. They spend some time thinking about it, but they do it very quickly, and so they know that the estimates are not very good. They usually do, at least in my experience, usually do give us an estimate of both the scope, the date, and the budget. They should try to inspire us. The steering committee should, before it gives it to the team, gives the work to the team. And we should be able to say, no, we don't find that particular work that inspiring, because human beings are like that. Not everybody finds a piece of work equally inspiring. So if a given team finds a piece of work relatively uninspiring, then they shouldn't be doing it. You wouldn't want really important work done by people who are totally uninspired. So you should naturally manage in such a way that you ask the team, are you inspired? If not, we'll give you something different. The team should be expected to re-estimate the scope, the date, and the budget, and give the steering committee feedback. And the steering committee should expect the team's estimates to be less inaccurate. That is to say, better. Why? Because the people are better, or they're at least the specific people, because they're doing it at a lower level of granularity, and because time has elapsed and new information has arrived. Okay, so a couple of distractions briefly. Hope you like these quotes. I like the Yogi Berra one, as some of you know. The Mike Tyson one, to me, is altogether quite useful. Robert Burns was, I think, a Scottish poet. And we're going to try to treat people in this whole situation as if they were real people. You see a few others. Okay, so we are all human, both in the good sense and the bad sense. That is to say, we're human in the sense that we can be creative and come up with rather surprising and impressive solutions to things. But we're also subject to human weaknesses, human failures. We certainly do think that their estimates, the estimates of the steering committee, are likely, I mean, very, very likely to be worse than ours. But also our initial estimate as a team won't be that good. We have to be quite honest about that. Hence, we don't say that the estimates magically become accurate. They become less inaccurate than what they were before. Once we have a product backlog, once we've shared all the information that we have, then we can understand what we know, what we don't know. And as we say here, we can prioritize our stupidity and then focus, having prioritized it, on getting smarter faster. And then we often learn faster from action than from just thinking in the clouds. So we do the initial planning relatively quickly, then we start doing the real work. We'll learn a lot more as we do the real work. So one more round of ideas. We can do we want to do the best we can within the time box. So we're starting to set an initial time box that at least has some chance of being reasonable. Then along the way, we can observe, inspect and adapt is one phrase, but observe and improve. We want to build, similarly, we want to build the plan iteratively and incrementally. So not only is the product in the time box, but also the planning or the plan itself is in a time box. So we do the best we can in an initial iteration of building the plan. And then as we live and learn, we incrementally improve the plan. So how can it improve? So this is to say, not only can the plan change for the worse, that is to say, we're going to get less done, it's going to take longer, the budget's going to be higher, all those so-called bad things, which is definitely can happen, particularly if Hurricane Maria or whatever, Michael, I think that it was another one recently, particularly if something really bad happens to us. But can things improve? So our idea is that things can improve and do improve quite often. We can get smarter as a team. The customer can get smarter and have us focus on more important features that give higher business value. Good change can happen. For example, we can remove impediments. Obviously, bad change can happen. We talked about this. about that. But in a little bit different way, but similar to removing impediments, we can improve our process. Okay, so after those ideas, after those basic comments, what's different? So at least one way of putting it in a very simple way is that the old way was stick to the darn plan. Suck it up and deliver the initial plan. I don't care whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. It was the plan. Suck it up, deliver the plan. The new approach, I think, should be, we've got a bunch of people, mainly 7 people on the team, maybe another 4 people as business stakeholders working with the team actively, although part-time. With those bunch of people, we should be learning a lot every 2 weeks. So let's look now every 2 weeks at what you've gotten done so far, what's been accomplished, what is the done software, and then tell me how the plan has changed. And they're expecting, the managers, I'll say, are expecting the plan to have changed. And at least in some sense, we're expecting the new plan to be better. I'm not saying it's always going to be true every time. Change can happen, and the new plan can be somewhat less accurate than the prior plan. I guess that's possible. But in general, we're expecting the plan to be better. We talked about this a little bit before, but again, how can it be better? It can be less, we can be, or start to do less stupid. We can do fewer stupid things. We can improve our velocity. We can adapt to change better. We can get better at mining between, or sorting out between the gold, the platinum, the diamonds, the silver, the copper, the dirt, and focusing on the more important stuff. We can release earlier, although maybe with less, but we can release earlier, get feedback from the customer faster, and find out how wrong we were. And at least Lean Startup says that we're going to be quite wrong. And I think that's usually the case. We're going to be notably wrong. And then we can learn from that, from the feedback that we get, for example, every sprint, and incorporate that in the plan and incorporate that in what we build. And then we can hopefully use the idea that 7 heads are better than 1. So I think that the approach between waterfall and agile is quite different. As I say here, night and day. So we want to use the planning in a very, very different way than before. Not, for example, as a punishment, but rather as a way of guiding ourselves and learning together as a team. Okay, so what are the goals going into the first day? We're not really going to get into the first day too much right now, but what are the goals? The first idea we have is that we want the team, when it does the initial planning, to be all on the same page. The 7 people and the 4 business stakeholders all at least think they're going in the same direction, and so forth. So I like to put it more concretely in 3 ways, 3, you might say, metaphors. They all see the same elephant. They all, because they participated and actively engaged and all had their voices heard, they all are more motivated. And then they've all shared the tacit knowledge that they each have, and some of it negative tacit knowledge, that is to say, incorrect tacit knowledge. But they've all shared the tacit knowledge that they've had and shared it with each other. And then, therefore, they all know what they all know, you might say. Everybody gets to add all their puzzle pieces to the picture, and everybody sees a fuller picture. So I think out of these things that we've said so far, we can take 5 actions. Maybe not as concrete as doing the day itself, but at least 5 general actions. We can start to use these ideas to change attitudes, both within the team and people around the team, but particularly with the managers. We can get more clarity on how important the next project is. They often tell us quickly, but we usually don't feel like we understand how important it is, and they're not as clear as we'd like them to be. It's quite common, I find. They're not as clear as we'd like them to be how it ranks on the list. Is it the number 1? Is it the number 3? Is it the number 10? But be clear about that. So I think we, the team, should insist on that. And it shouldn't be that hard to convince management to do that for us. We want to then take the action of agreeing that we're going to build the team's initial plan in 1 day, and then give our initial feedback back to the steering committee. Hopefully they don't shoot the messenger, so we may have to work on that problem as well. Certainly we may have to work on the fear that the messenger is going to be shot for saying something to the steering committee that the steering committee, at least in that person's opinion, is not likely to want to hear. I think that's a big fear. It may be more of a fear than an actual reality that the messenger will be shot. In any case, we want to start the idea of iterating on the planning. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say in this half an hour. What are your questions? So I think probably the best way is add your questions here in the chat. I may ask you to explain it more, in which case unmute yourself. But what are your questions? I went through it fairly quickly, but hopefully you have some questions along the way. It was that clear? Oh, so how detailed is the initial plan? How much in the future are we looking, says Walter. So I think that so let me show the picture. I didn't explain this as well as I might have done. We're going to explain it a lot more tomorrow, but as you can see from, let me see if I can get my cursor working again. Sorry, Walter, just a second. I want to get this out of my own way. Okay, so we're planning for the initial 6 months in that 6.5-year time frame. So we're planning on day 0 over here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but over here the ARP day is day 0, 1 day. We're planning for those initial 6 months, and we've got stories. I'm going to say later tomorrow 50 stories that detail that out in a fair amount of detail for the whole 6 months. We've sorted those out. We've prioritized them. We're doing them in general, the more important stuff earlier, the less important stuff later. We may find that we never get to some of that less important stuff. We're going to end up with with story points on all those stories. We're going to have business value points on all of them. We're going to have at least a guess at the team's velocity. So it's a fair amount of detail, I'd say. But it won't be, for example, in my recommendation, we would eventually have 96 stories. So it won't be to that level of detail, but it'll be to, I'll call it a medium level of detail fairly quickly. So we will all felt in some sense or another rushed, or that we don't know everything. So it won't be complete in that way. Does that answer your question, Walter? Okay, other questions? Rafi says, can you provide more info about excuse me, Rafi, just a second, more info about the plan reevaluation process? How frequent, time box length, people involved? So yes, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. I guess maybe not as much. We're going to talk more about the day itself tomorrow, but a little bit about the what I call grooming, refinement. I call it release plan refactoring. So we want to do it every sprint. I'm going to recommend 2 meetings every sprint to refactor the plan. And we have the whole team involved. We have the product owner involved with others outside the team, particularly including the business stakeholders, but others outside the team, maybe doing some research as well. And all those different activities come together in those 2 meetings, and we see the net effect. And then we're changing the plan in 2 ways. We're making the plan more detailed so we can feed it into the sprints, and we're revising you might call it overall plan. I'm usually assuming that it's taking multiple sprints to have a release. So some of us are working in a condition where we're releasing multiple times in a sprint, or we're releasing every sprint. So I'm not really talking about that context right now. But we're revising the plan for whatever, let's say it's 6 sprints for a release. We're revising that plan, the remaining sprints in that plan, every sprint. So new stories may come in, stories may be pushed off to the next release. All kinds of things might be happening. Does that give you a good enough idea, Rafi? At least of my idea. I hope so. Let me go to. This is Sean. Is that you? Based on the 6 months time frame, is there a monthly discussion to confirm progress, and if there has been a change to scope or delivery? I would say that we're doing. I'm assuming, Sean, that we're doing 2-week sprints. At least I'm strongly recommending that. And so whatever the length of the sprint, we're reviewing things every sprint with the business stakeholders who are showing up for the sprint review every sprint, of course. I say, of course, somewhat sarcastically. So probably most of us have had problems getting all the business stakeholders to come regularly. But if they do, or at least for the ones that do come, we review that with them every sprint. And so we see the progress in terms of the working product, and we quickly review the change in plan. Now, can we get the business stakeholders to come to those refactoring, grooming, refinement meetings? I'd like them to. That'd be my recommendation, but usually they're not coming to the sprint review often enough. Could the sprint review be so full with just reviewing the features that we don't have time to review the plan sufficiently? I could see that happening. So you may have to make some adaptations to what I'm suggesting, depending on your people, what they come to, who shows up, and so forth. But I would say let's adjust it. Well, the key word to me in your sentence is monthly, and I would adjust it I would be thinking about adjusting and reviewing every 2 weeks. Okay, Shauna says, where do features come into play? Ooh, okay. I'm not assuming that one way or the other. That is to say, whether we have this, well, you didn't say what you mean by features, Shauna, but let me say what I think it often means to people, and then you can say, well, we use it a different way. People do use the word different ways, but often people have a concept kind of like this of 3 levels of things for the customer, or maybe 4. The fourth, the highest level might be the release itself. Then they break the release into sort of a 3-level hierarchy of, at the high level we have, well, sometimes we call them epics, but sometimes we call them features. And the next level is either the other one, that is to say either epics or features, depending on what the first level was. And then the lowest level is the sprint size user stories. So I'm assuming you're thinking more of a 2-level hierarchy. We've got features that are composed of multiple user stories. And so when do features come into play? At least in my schema that I'm talking about today and tomorrow, I'm not adding them, but I'm not against them either. So the stories that I mentioned quickly, we would have 50 over the 6 months. They would all be small. They would all be, on average, each of those stories would be bigger than they will need to be later. So they're kind of getting to be feature sized in the way you're thinking of it, but I'm not requiring people to track that. Usually there's not that many stories there. So the key question is not which features are getting done or not done, although you may have to talk about that to some of the managers, I understand. But the key question for the team is, what are the exact features that are sufficient to have a minimum viable product? That's the key question. And they don't care that much about features per se, but what are the specific stories we're going to include or not include? And can we skinny them down at all? Or do we need to include something, or can we take something out? Those kinds of questions are the key questions, I think. Anyway, a partial answer to your question. I'm not mainly I'm not trying to make it that complex, at least for the first pass, and force everybody to use the feature idea. If you want to use it, it's probably going to work out fine. But you may want to ease it up for your team and not make it that complex the first time you get them to do this kind of thing. Okay, enough on that one, Shauna. Thanks. Any other questions? And then, Carrie, how are we doing in our time box? We've got, I think, time for a question or two. I'm expecting Neil to have a question or two. I'm kind of teasing him. Any questions, Neil? Neil says he's good. Okay. Thanks, everyone. We will, let me just tell you what's going to happen. So I hope all of you are coming tomorrow at the same time. We're doing a half an hour on the day itself. What are the specific activities in the day, and we'll walk through that relatively quickly, faster than we would in the Agile Release Planning workshop that we do every week, which is a one-day exercise. But we're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to keep this recording and make that available to you. We also have the slide deck, which we will send to you. Excuse me, we'll put it up on the website, and you can download it if you'd like to, and we'll send you a link to that. Does that sound reasonable, Carrie? We'll put the recording and the slide deck on the Lean-Agile Training website. Carrie will send you a link to download those. and hopefully you like those. We'll also send you a link to download our book for free, our Agile Release Planning book that you may or may not have known about, but you're certainly welcome to download that. Okay, thanks very much. I enjoyed it. Hope you did. Please give us feedback. Don't be hesitant to send me an email, send Carrie an email, send Mary an email, and tell us what you think. We'd also be very interested to know what other kinds of sessions you'd like to have, what other kinds of topics you'd like us to address. Thanks very much. Hope to see many of you, if not all of you, tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.